Let's look at some more of the symbolism from ancient Egypt. You have King Tutankhamun, and if you look at his head regalia, one is the vulture, the other one is the snake. The vulture and uraeus, which is the cobra, are emblems at the forehead, symbolize the two lands of Upper and Lower Egypt, respectively. The uraeus represents the goddess Wadjet, who was often portrayed as a cobra. The uraeus symbolized the pharaoh's divine sovereignty and authority. The vulture is the symbol of Wadjet's sister, the goddess Nekbet. Nekbet was often portrayed as a white vulture, which represents purification. Together, Wadjet and Nekbet served as the protector goddesses of the pharaoh. So you see, one was good and the other evil. And if you look at King Tut's headgear, it looks just like a cobra. And there you have the crook and the flail again. Now, the inflatable neck is called the hood in a cobra, and in Wiki Answers it says, the flaps on a cobra that you see on its neck is called a hood. When you see the hood closed, it means it's in a calm mood. When it's in an attack stance, the hood will open and the hood shows the target that it's going to attack. Also, they shoot acid at your eyes to blind you so they can get into their prey. So looking again at King Tut, he's in attack mode and shooting acid into the eyes to blind. It's symbol of telling lies to blind. And there you have the black and white, the white representing the good and the black representing the evil, which is symbolized also in a board, a chess board. And you see all the gods of Egypt have the cobra hood inflated as to attack. They all have it. These were the gods of Egypt. They were all connected to the serpent and the serpent symbolism. And they were colossal. They were huge and set in front of their temples. Here you have again the headgear of Tutankhamun, and you see the vulture and the cobra there in the head. You see what looks like a beard is actually the tail of a snake. And there you have Moses also wearing the same headgear. And in the back, it's a snake. Now, Moses, when he was born, his life was spared, but he was confiscated by Pharaoh, and Pharaoh became his father and teacher. If Satan could not take his life, which he tried to do, he would mold his education and character by assimilating him into the Egyptian culture. So here's the type. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out into his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said unto him that did the wrong, Wherefore do you smite your fellow? And he said, Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me too, as you'd killed the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat by a well. God had told Moses that he would deliver Israel, but having learned Pharaoh's wisdom, Moses used Satan's method of good and evil to bring about justice. He resorted to violence through punishment. Through it, he endangered fear even in his own people. Moses made a miserable failure of his first attempt, and like many another, he immediately lost confidence in God and turned his back on his appointed work. he fled from the wrath of Pharaoh. He concluded that because of his great sin in taking the life of the Egyptian, God would not permit him to have any part in the work of delivering his people from their cruel bondage. But the Lord allowed these things that he might teach Moses the gentleness, goodness, and long-suffering that it is necessary for every laborer for the master to possess in order to be a successful worker in his cause. And this is taken from Ellen White, CT 407, paragraph 2. Moses had been learning much that he must unlearn. The influences that had surrounded him in Egypt, the love of his foster mother, his own high position as the king's grandson, the dissipation on every hand, the refinement, the subtlety, and the mysticism of a false religion, the splendor of idolatrous worship, the solemn grandeur of architecture and sculpture, all had left deep impressions upon his developing mind and had molded, to some extent, his habits of character. Time, change of surroundings, and communion with God could remove these impressions. It would require on the part of Moses himself a struggle as for life, to renounce error and accept truth, but God would be his helper when the conflict should be too severe for human strength. Again, Ellen White, CC 86, paragraph 3. In the military schools of Egypt, Moses was taught the law of force, and so strong a hold did this teaching have upon his character that it required 40 years of quiet and communion with God and nature, to fit him for the leadership of Israel by the law of love. The same lesson Paul had to learn, taken from Ellen White, Education 65.2. In the military schools of Egypt, Moses was taught the law of force. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same one. So, the exodus from Egypt to Canaan is a type of our exodus from iniquity into agape, the law of life, the law of nonviolence. From bondage of Egypt to the freedom of God and his law of love. Humanity has been given only two choices: the tree of life, which is God's jurisdiction, or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is Satan's jurisdiction. God's law is singular, it is one, it is love. Satan's is two, it is binary. God's is the monad, Satan is the duad. God is the truly divine, Satan is devilish. God's law is the truly good. Satan's knowledge of good and evil is evil. God is agape, and Satan is iniquity. And you have Jesus Christ representing God against Lucifer, who rebelled against the divine law. And you have life versus death. Those are the choices humanity has been given. And it's important to know that there is no mixture between them. God does not cross over into Satan's jurisdiction, and Satan does not cross over into God's jurisdiction. In God's jurisdiction, we have freedom. In Satan's, we have bondage. We have service of love under God and service of fear under Satan. We have peace under God and strife and war under Satan. We have creation under God and destruction under Satan. We have the Sabbath with God, the true day of worship, and we have the sun day, the day of worship of the sun gods. And again, there is no crossing over. There are separate jurisdictions. So if God never changes and his love never ends, then why does Satan, according to the word Iblis, despairs of the mercy of God? And I believe that the answer is that he painted himself into a corner because he rejected mercy. Because Satan rejected agape love, he can no longer see the mercy of God. By what judgment he judges, he will be judged. In Hebrews 10:26 it says that if we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remains no more sacrifice for sins. The word sin is hamartano in the Greek, and it means to miss the mark, and so not to share in the prize. You see, Lucifer misses the mark, and that's why he will not share in the prize. We have been deceived, but we are being called out, and we are being asked to not miss the mark. Hebrews 10:27, but if we reject the truth, all we have left is but a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries, those that oppose themselves to God, to his law of unconditional love. In 1 Peter 4:17 it says, "For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God, with those that have the oracles of God, with those who read the Bible, who believe in Jesus Christ, and who believe in his mercy." If judgment begins with us, and if it first begins at us, what shall be the end of them that obey not? And if the righteous scarcely be saved from this condemnatory principle of good and evil, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? If it took Moses 40 years in the desert to escape from this system of order, of violence, what shall happen to us? Ellen White says, "Heaven, looking down and seeing the delusions into which men were led, knew that a divine instructor must come to earth. Men in ignorance and moral darkness must have light, spiritual light, for the world knew not God, and he must be revealed to their understanding. Truth looked down from heaven and saw not the reflection of her image." Human beings did not reflect God's agape love. "For dense clouds of moral darkness being good and evil, the merit and demerit system, for dense clouds of moral darkness and gloom enveloped the world, and the Lord Jesus alone was able to roll back the clouds, for he was the light of the world." In 1 John 4:17 it says, "Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has torment or punishment. He that fears is not made perfect in love." We hope that you have gotten a blessing from these series, and we'll be back with more.